Week 11 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few players I look to buy and trade for this week. The first player, CeeDee Lamb, the Dallas Cowboys. I know the numbers are going to go down for CeeDee Lamb, but I think we could see a couple pop games here and there. If it's either Cooper Rush or Trey Lance, the rest of the way. With Dak Prescott most likely out for the season with the torn hamstring, and we'll get final word on that in the next day or two here, I believe, for Prescott. So CeeDee Lamb, he had a couple big games this season. Going into the year, I was never convinced he was the number 2 overall pick to come off the board for fantasy owners. Like I said, he missed all the training camp. I've said in many videos this season, and him and Dak Prescott towards the end of the year, they were off a little bit, especially in that playoff game versus the Green Bay Packers. So CeeDee Lamb now, like I said, with a bad quarterback play, Cooper Rush, Trey Lance, whoever it's going to be, the numbers definitely would fall off, but I think you get CeeDee Lamb on a big discount here with the trade deadline coming up this week or next in most fantasy leagues. So like I said, with all those factors and not living up to that number 2, 3 overall pick he was, CeeDee Lamb, he's a buy low candidate this week. The next player is Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Breece Hall and this Jet offense, you would think on paper they're one of the best offenses in the league, but obviously that hasn't been the case. And Aaron Rodgers, his best days are behind him, 40 years old, coming off the Achilles. The mobility's gone, and even the turnover numbers spiked up over the last few seasons. 3 weeks in a row, Breece Hall's had 12 or less fantasy points in PPR leagues. So this week coming up a decent matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts, and the Breece Hall owner definitely should be concerned a little bit, though, that his numbers have dropped off after he got off to a roaring start the first 3 weeks of the season. Then he tailed off for a couple, then 2 monster games, and now he's tailed off once again. But I believe Breece Hall, he's got a good schedule coming up. Indianapolis in week 11, then they go on bye, and then some great matchups. Seattle, at Miami, at Jacksonville in weeks 13, 14, and 15. So like I said, Breece Hall, he was a top 4 or 5 pick overall in most fantasy drafts, and his numbers have dropped off over the last couple weeks. This is a perfect time to buy him low, because if he gets back on track, and this Jet team, they're at least in ball games where they're going to run the football a whole lot, Hall's going to put up those numbers. And also, he's a good receiver out of the backfield as well. Next player, DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. So DeAndre Swift, it's been a good season for him for the most part. The first 3 weeks, he couldn't do anything on the ground, failed to average 2.5 yards per carry, and then he really turned things around. But the last couple weeks, the numbers have dropped off just a bit. Week 9 in Arizona, 16 carries, 51 yards, 6 catches, 31 yards in that one. Week 10 versus the Pats, 16 carries, 59 yards, a catch, 6 yards. So a decent matchup coming up versus Green Bay, then Minnesota, Detroit. And DeAndre Swift, he's a dual threat out of the backfield. We know he could catch the football. We know he could run in between the tackles. Roschon Johnson's not really a threat to his job, only taking some goal line touches here and there. And also, we saw Khalil Herbert got traded away at the deadline to the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's Swift's backfield. I know this Bear offense, they've struggled mightily. They've only scored 27 points in the last 3 games, but I believe they're going to get back to the basics, and I think Swift is going to be a nice part of it. So after coming off a bad game with only 7.5 fantasy points in PPR leagues, I think it's a good time for owners to go out there and get Swift this week. The next player, J.K. Dobbins of Los Angeles Chargers. So Gus Edwards, he returned to the lineup in the nice victory versus the Titans, where he had 10 carries, 55 yards, and he ate into Dobbins' workload. And Dobbins also got vultured as a touchdown on Hoskins in that game versus Tennessee. So had 18 total touches in that game was J.K. Dobbins. We know he's the best receiving back out of the backfield between Edwards and Haskins as well. And Dobbins, I know he's been injury prone throughout his NFL career, but this season he's been a solid running back, and he's been top 10, top 15, hovering around all season in fantasy points at the position. So week 11, a good matchup versus Cincinnati Bengals. Their defense can't stop anyone. And this Charger team, they're definitely playing great football, winning 4 out of 5 now. And Dobbins has been a big part of it. So after one down game, I would send some feelers out there to see if I could get Dobbins on my team, because like I said, he's got that breakaway ability. He could go out there and make plays, and this is a perfect time to buy him this week as long as he's healthy. Next player, Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Thomas Jr., the last couple of weeks, the numbers have gone down. Trevor Lawrence possibly out for the season. And we know Mac Jones is in there, quarterback, and that's a huge downgrade, even though Lawrence hasn't had a great year as well. So 2 weeks in a row, no-show performances pretty much for Thomas Jr. Week 9 at the Eagles, 2 catches, 22 yards, a 2-point conversion. In Week 10 versus the Minnesota Vikings, 2 catches, 12 yards. So Week 11, it's a game where they're going to have to throw early and often at the Lions, where I believe they're going to be trailing a whole lot. Is this Jacksonville Jaguar team. Then they go on by. But Brian Thomas, I know he's banged up as well with the rib injury, and he's the number one option in the passing game. Christian Kirk's out for the season. Gabe Davis really hasn't been a factor. And Evan Ingram, yes, he could give him a run for his money a little bit, is the number one option. But either way, number 1-2 option in this offense, Brian Thomas, he's going to get targets. He's going to get a little healthy, I believe, especially with the bye week coming up in week 12. And right now, you pretty much could get him for nothing. With the injury, with the numbers down, and with Mac Jones at quarterback, he's an easy buy low candidate. I believe this week the next player, Cade Otton of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Cade Otton, he went on a nice run for a few weeks in a row with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans out. So we know Godwin, he's out for the season. Evans, I believe he'll be back in week 12 after the bye week for this Tampa Bay Buc team, but he's still going to be the number 2 option in the passing game is Cade Otton with Mike Evans back. So Cade Otton, he's a big target. He's definitely showed flashes over the last couple seasons, but the last few weeks we saw when he was the number 1 target in this offense, the damage he could do. Week 8 versus Atlanta, 9 catches, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 9 at the Chiefs, 8 catches, 77 yards, a touchdown. And then week 10 versus San Francisco, a tough matchup, but he still had 8 targets, 5 catches, 35 yards. So like I said, with him going on bye week in a down game and Mike Evans returning to the lineup, this is a perfect time to buy Cade Otton. He's going to be the number 2 option in the passing game. Baker Mayfield, we know, is a gunslinger. They're going to throw that football a whole lot. And they got a pretty easy schedule coming up. Week 12 at the Giants, week 13 at the Panthers, and week 14 versus the Raiders. So that definitely could pay big dividends for the playoff push for fantasy owners. If Cade Otton by chance is even dropped in your fantasy league, which would be a big mistake, I believe, by your fantasy owner, you go out there and get him. Well, obviously right now you offer a deal and get him with that easy schedule, and he's still going to be a big part of this offense. And the final play I look to buy and trade for is Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. I know the league's possibly catching up to Daniels a little bit. He's got to make adjustments now with the first 10 weeks of the season over with. But Jaden Daniels, the last couple games, his numbers have definitely dropped off. But in that week 8 game versus the Bears, if he didn't throw that Hail Mary touchdown, his numbers really would have went down. So week 8 versus the Bears, 326, a touchdown, 52 rush yards. 9 at the Giants, it was an easy ball game, 209 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 35 rush yards. And then last week in a tough matchup versus the Steelers, 202 pass yards and only 5 rush yards. So they definitely bottled them up with Pittsburgh. Washington, they were in control for the majority of the game. And then Russell Wilson and the offense roared back and played good football. For Jaden Daniels, we know he's not 100% with the rib injury. And also with Brian Robinson not in there the last couple of weeks, I believe that's why the numbers went down. So right now, if the Jaden Daniels owner, he's looking to trade him away, this would be a time to get him on your roster, because I still believe he's going to make adjustments. I believe he's one of the more athletic quarterbacks in all the league. And like I said, if Brian Robinson's back in the offense, he's going to make things better for Jaden Daniels. And also that rib injury, as long as he hasn't re-aggravated it, it's going to heal over time. So if he could get by this week 11 and then get 10 days off, I believe Jaden Daniels will get back to form. So right now, hitting a little bit of a rookie wall, I think he bounces back and he's a buy low player this week. His upside compared to most quarterbacks is still great. I believe in Jaden Daniels. So after hitting a little bit of a hiccup and a rookie wall, I believe he bounces back and he's a good buy low candidate this week. So that's a few plays I look to buy and trade for week 11 of the fantasy football season, with the trade deadline in most leagues this week or in week 12.